from your book, Watermelons, the Green Movement's True Colors. I take a deep breath because this is so bracing, outrageous.
I try.
Imagine that everything you knew about the environment was wrong, that global warming was something to be desired, not feared, that organic food, sustainability, biofuels, and the World Wildlife Federation, WWF, were far more harmful to the world and its inhabitants than genetically modified food, industrial oil, and ExxonMobil. Imagine if it didn't matter one jot how big your carbon footprint was. Close quotation. May one suppose, Mr. Delingpole, that you are engaging in the most outrageous overstatement for the sake of argumentative provocation?
No. Every word you've just read out is entirely true. And actually, I think the Republican voters among your audience will know that already.
Global warming is something to be desired?
Well, yeah. If you look at the history of the human species, you look, for example, at the bountiful period of warmth in Roman times, in the medieval warming period. These were times when civilization flourished and grew. Why? Because if you look at the distribution of humans on the planet, you realize that we tend to do better in warmer places rather than cold places. We can survive at really, very northerly latitudes, but nevertheless, we tend to congregate where it is warmth, where we don't have to spend so much time trying to keep warm, where we can grow crops.
Okay, grant you that for the sake of argument. That was the planet's natural cycles.
Yeah.
What we have now is a growing population. The 7 billionth child was born, according to the United Nations, sometime last month. And economic growth, the early phases of economic growth as demonstrated in China and in India, which between them account for something like 3 billion people, involves the burning of huge amounts of carbon fuels. And so, fine, maybe a little global warming every few centuries does us some good, but we're talking about a secular, sharply rising trend. And we'll fry ourselves within a couple of centuries.
Well, we're not, though, are we? We're looking... If you listen to Al Gore, we're facing a rise in temperatures of up to 4 degrees C by the end of this century. Well, actually, if you look at the real-world data, as opposed to the crazed computer models of the activists pushing this scam, what you realize is that they're entirely within normal bounds. This idea that there is a correlation...
They also have the problem that most of the increase in temperature of the 20th century took place in the first half of the century.
Yeah, I mean,
all right.
It's sure, CO2 emissions, anthropogenic CO2 emissions have risen, but there does not seem to be a disastrous increase in temperatures as well. In fact, global warming stopped in 1998. We are entering a 30-year cooling cycle.
Who says that?
Well, real scientists using real-world data, as opposed to scientists who are using projections.
Okay, James, maybe they're right. Maybe that you're right. But listen to this. The Economist, your favorite publication, once again, The Economist magazine, quote, "Some scientists think that the planet is already on an irreversible journey to dangerous warming." Al Gore. "A few climate change skeptics think the problem will right itself." James Delingpole. Either may be correct, but the broad scientific consensus is that serious climate change is a danger. They're not saying certainty, a danger. And this newspaper, The Economist magazine, believes that as an insurance policy against a catastrophe that may never happen, the world needs to adjust its behavior to try to avert that threat, close quote.
Yeah.
An insurance policy. They may be onto a little something. You may be onto a little something. We can't be sure, but the risks of running this experiment with the planet are too high.
Yeah. It's known as the precautionary principle, and by the same token,
pretty reasonable.
It is quite possible that there is an alien race out there which is bent on coming to the Earth and destroying us, like in Battlefield LA. It could happen. Does this mean that on the precautionary principle, we should prepare for this potential disaster by building giant death lasers on every continent? What about asteroids? Shouldn't we worry about them? If an asteroid hits us, it could be disastrous. We could go the way of the dinosaurs. that, again, is a thing we should be preparing for. What you have to ask yourself is, how likely is it? And what
does it cost?
Cost-benefit analysis.
Right.
What is completely missing from this whole mass hysteria outbreak is a sense of proportion, of cost-benefit analysis. Look at what is happening to the American economy right now. You may have noticed it's not looking in very good shape. Now, was it really wise of President Obama to allocate $38.6 billion of taxpayers' money, or maybe of borrowed money from China, investing in clean tech startups like Cylindra, which has cost the taxpayer $527 million, like Robert Kennedy Jr.'s company, which has taken the taxpayer for $1.6 billion? Where is the benefit from this?
From your most recent book, Watermelons, quote, "It was another dreary November morning in 2009, and I was sitting at my desk wondering what to write next." I know the feeling, by the way. "Into my lap dropped the story, ClimateGate, which would not only change my life forever, but quite possibly help save Western civilization from the greatest threat it has ever known," close quote. Okay, we'll get to ClimateGate.
Yeah.
But come on, James, the greatest threat Western civilization has ever known? What about Adolf Hitler? What about the thousands of nuclear weapons the Soviet Union had aimed at us for all those years?
There's an order of difference here. The thing about both the Soviet Union and Adolf Hitler's Germany was that the enemy was plain in view. We knew these guys were bad. They had black uniforms, they had swastikas, they had tanks. They were obviously the bad guys. They wanted to destroy us. What makes the modern environmental movement so dangerous is that it masks its intentions behind this cloak of cuddly, touchy-feely, polar bear hugging,
Nobel Prize
winning righteousness. Ordinary people identify with this stuff. What could be nicer than trying to save those little cuddly polar bears from melting, due to our wanton greed and selfishness? It gels with a sense that I think grew in the affluent 90s, where people started asking themselves questions like, shouldn't there be limits to growth? Isn't there more to life than consumption? So you had this alliance of ordinary people, of kids who'd been brainwashed at school, of the big corporations which wanted to get in on the act by greenwashing their image, of powerful NGOs like Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund, of politicians being seen to take action to address issues of public concern. So what you had is this unstoppable bandwagon, all pushing this agenda based on the flimsiest of junk science. That's the problem.
And claiming the moral high ground in a way that okay. ClimateGate. Computer server at the Climatic Research Unit at the University of East Anglia is hacked. Thousands of emails and computer files go up on the web. And according to Wikipedia, quote, James Delingpole popularized the term ClimateGate. Climate skeptics allege that the emails revealed scientists manipulating climate data and suppressing their critics, close quote. Was this the moment when the curtain fell, or no?
I think the groundwork had been done by McIntyre and McKittrick, the two Canadians who exposed the hockey stick curve, the Michael Mann's famous graph, which showed that showed that we were going to hell in a handcart.
That there would be an inflection point when suddenly temperatures would rise quickly and irreversibly, right? Okay.
But what ClimateGate provided, ClimateGate was the smoking gun. It provided the evidence of what we had hitherto suspected but had been unable to confirm. Mm-hmm. It was also significant because it came just before the Copenhagen summit. And actually, I think it helped torpedo that summit below the waterline.
That turned out to be a bust.
Yes.
The governments of the world did not agree to place caps on carbon emissions and
yeah.
stuff. All right. New York Times editorial, quote, perhaps now, this is an editorial from last July, after ClimateGate had run for some months. Perhaps now we can put the manufactured controversy, you're doing the manufacturing,
yes.
known as ClimateGate behind us, and turn to the task of actually doing something about global warming. A panel in Britain has concluded that scientists whose email had been hacked late last year had not distorted scientific evidence. Another climate change controversy may also be receding from view. This one involves an incorrect assertion in the United Nations 3,000-page report on climate change in 2007 that the Himalayan glaciers could disappear by 2035, the UN acknowledged the error and promised to tighten its review procedures, close quote. In other words, nonsense.
Yes.
And it all continues to roll along.
Move along,
so
nothing
the
to
state
see
of
here.
play is what?
It's like the final scene of Terminator 2. No matter how many times, well, we keep killing the devil, evil robot machine, and it keeps coming back.
Right.
Because there are so many powerful vested interests, the National Academy of Sciences, NASA, GIS, all the rent-seeking corporations which have got skin in the game. They are making so much money out of
off the government,
off the government, off the taxpayer. You know, you've got the solar panel boondoggle. You've got the wind power boondoggle. These industries would not exist except through taxpayer subsidy.
So the argument that climate skeptics, such as James Delingpole, are one way or another being subsidized by major oil companies.
Oh, I wish, Peter, I wish.
But has anybody ever added up what Exxon has spent to get studies conducted versus what the federal government... Go ahead.
They have. There's a blogger called Joe Nova in Australia who's calculated that the various interests pushing global warming have spent 3,500 times the amount that skeptics have been paid by, you know, the Heritage Foundation, the CEI, or whatever, to pursue their defense of truth.
Okay. Last question about global warming. You said that it has a kind of achieved the status of a sort of religion.
Yes.
You also mentioned that you think it grew out of the affluence of the 90s. Back during the 70s, there was concern about global cooling, actually, at the time. So the question is, what is it? There is something, and you mentioned that it's like Terminator 2, I don't remember that. Seems like this thing that you can't kill. It keeps coming back. There is this kind of collectivist impulse that seems to recur again and again and again. And at one moment it may take in the West the form of a kind of soft identification with communism and the statist impulse. Growth of government we see again. Margaret Thatcher tries to bat it down in Britain. She seems to succeed. Here's the point. Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan during the 80s seemed to be getting someplace. And now here we are back in the same hole. And this collectivist impulse at the moment takes a number of forms, but one of them is the global warming. So why is that?
I think there is within the human species an atavistic impulse for self-hatred and self-destruction. You look at the medieval times when people sort of sought to atone for their sins by wearing hair shirts. You saw in primitive times people would sacrifice virgins to the sun god or whatever in order to appease the sun god for our sins against the world. Every generation believes...
So it's a expiation.
Every generation believes that it is the one which is so important that it has in its power the ability to destroy the world. And it wants to punish itself and torture itself. And this, of course, elides with another instinct, which is people like to control other people's lives. I mean, as a libertarian, I believe the exact opposite. The impulse to power. This will never go away. So when these two impulses unite, it becomes very powerful and very dangerous.